This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is up on Center Stage, the show about the arts and the artists behind their work. Today in Stamford, Connecticut, at the Palace Theater, there is an unusual happening. I want to use the word happening because it is much more than a concert that would normally be featured at the theater. It is an engagement of children from fourth grade classes from the Stamford public school systems who are participating in a fantastic new project, a reimagined performance of Prokofiev's beloved Peter and the Wolf. But today it is going to be recognized as Whitney and the Wolf. This performance features these children playing with the professional musicians of Stamford Orchestra Lumos. If you are a fan of my show, you will be well acquainted with a reinvigoration of Stamford's beloved symphony orchestra, as I have interviewed their president, Russell Jones, and music director and conductor, Michael Stern, many times on Center Stage. Their vision has been clear. With Orchestra Lumos, they are shining a light through world-class music and musicians and engaging new audiences. It's exciting to me that the children who are performing today have been given recorders from Orchestra Lumos and instrumental instruction in preparation for this day. If I was a fourth grader and had the opportunity to play alongside professional musicians in such an orchestra at the Palace Theater, I would be thrilled. So I have with me today to speak about this enormous undertaking the Director of Education, Community Engagement, and Inclusion, Anthony Parce. Anthony is an established professional violist with the Nashville Symphony Orchestra and has held posts with Houston, North Carolina, and New World Symphonies. He will be conducting the Whitney and the Wolf performance, but perhaps more importantly, he is an Argus community-embedded musician with years of experience in engaging young people. And also, award-winning author and educator Valerie Bolling is with us. Valerie is the author of 6 picture books, including Let's Dance, the Crystal Kite Award winner, Together We Ride, Together We Swim, and the Scholastic Acorn Early Reader Series, Rainbow Days. She has worked in the Greenwich Public Schools as an educator for 30 years. Valerie and Anthony have worked together to formulate this new rendering of a much beloved classic. And Valerie will be fulfilling the very important task of narrator in the concert. So without further ado, Valerie and Anthony, welcome to Center Stage. It is such a delight to have you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
You bet.
Yeah.
Well, first of
Thank
all,
you so
I've just got to say bravo to both of you for your tireless work in education and the management of sharing the wealth of music and literature to young people. You are building many bridges in a time when I feel it is much needed. Anthony, can you address that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all aware that as you look at priorities for spending in school budgets and in cuts that can be passed down, it's an easy place to slash. I think it's always been on the chopping block ever since I was a kid. It's been on the chopping block. And instrumental education is complicated in that you can't really make up for certain amounts of time in certain years. It's an ability that comes with lots of repetition and with lots of encouragement and years of hard and fun work. And unfortunately, if you miss certain formative years, it's hard to get back on the train. I've been a professional musician. I played in professional orchestras my whole life, and I feel like I started violin when I was 12, and I'm really late on the game when it comes to that. That was old for most of the people that I would play with in sections. A lot of folks started when they were 5 or 4 on their instruments and had support through that whole time. I've played with a lot of incredible musicians for whom that support came through public school education, came through their orchestra programs in their public schools, starting in elementary school. And it's just a priority that I, as a musician and as an orchestra member, I see so much value in it outside of just creating more musicians. Some of the best people I know are lovers of music, players of music, and would never think to be a professional musician because that's just not the path they took. But it opens so many doors for you in life. It opens so much opportunity. So a huge priority of ours is to inspire and give exposure to a variety of instruments. You know, when we were first having conversations about setting up the concert we're doing today, the one of the highlighted priorities was how do we value the process of playing instrumental music while also opening the door to options and opportunities of here's what it can look like to be an instrumental musician. You know, I think there's a lot of different ways that people or that children, students see it in social media and on TV and in different places, but it's pretty rare to see it live. It's pretty rare to be in the room, and even more rare to be in the room and be an active participant. So that was the real goal: is engage from a perspective of we're doing this together, we're making it happen together, and we're playing instruments, all of us together.
This is so fantastic. So, Valerie, if you were in the fourth grade right now, I mean, you would be excited to have a recorder and be playing with professional musicians. I'm just going to take that for granted, right?
Yes, I would. And in fact, I first played recorder in second grade in Stanford Public Schools. I was a student at Hart School, and that's the year that we got our recorders. Yes.
Wow, that is so fantastic. Did you keep it up?
I did not. I ended up switching over to the violin.
There you go. There you go. You see, Anthony, cross pollination already.
Well, and I think that's the goal. I mean, I will be very honest to say recorders, perhaps it's a very niche instrument. It's maybe not the most beautiful instrument. And in my experience as an educator, if I never have to say the recorder is not a weapon ever again, that would be fine. Um, but it's a wonderful gateway instrument. You know, it's so accessible, and so it's so great to get started and start learning certain skills and traits, and then be able to translate them into the flute or the violin or the
Right.
saxophone, wherever that path takes you.
Oh, this is so exciting. So, just tell me how this works. Well, first of all, maybe we better talk about the concept. Maybe Valerie, I know you worked a lot in this with your divine talents as a writer. How did you foresee the concept for reimagining this wonderful piece?
Sure. So I was so excited, Pam, when Anthony gave me the opportunity to reimagine it, because as a writer, I mean, my favorite part of writing is actually revision. I know that's not true for everyone. Some people they love it. They get so excited when they come up with a new idea. Others, when they get that first draft on the page, they're thrilled. For me, the thrill comes with the constant reworking of words to get them exactly perfect.
Mm, mm.
And then even when you think they're perfect, right? They're really not, because you see, another word that you could use. But that for me was most exciting. So as I set out to do this, I said, well, first of all, why does it have to be Peter? Why does it have to be centered around a boy? I'm not a boy. I'm not a male. Let's center this around a girl. And then, because I like alliteration, I said, if it's someone and the wolf, we have to have a W name. So I came up with Whitney. And
Okay.
then I began to look at the text. And one of the things I looked at was the characters. And, the characters in the original version are referred to as the bird, the duck, the cat. And I said, I want them to have names. And if Whitney's name is alliterative with wolf, why don't I give them alliterative names? So we have Brandon Bird and Calvin Cat and Daphne Duck. So that
Wonderful.
was because you have to get your characters together first in a story, right? So, and then I began to look at the language, and I wanted to create something that wasn't just Yes, make it a bit more contemporary. But as Anthony and I were discussing, and I'm going to use his words, he talked about making it more relevant and accessible. And that's really what it is. The original version is so wonderful. And so I really didn't make big changes. I also knew that I could not change it much because I needed to have it be aligned to the music. So, but I looked at individual words. So one example at the very beginning, the original version starts out early one morning. Peter opened the gate and walked out into the big green meadow. On a branch of a big tree sat a little bird, Peter's friend. And so, as a writer, I'm noticing we've got the word big 2 times there. I'm not sure that we need that. And so I changed the beginning to early one crisp, clear morning. Whitney quietly opened the gate to her grandfather's house. She looked over her shoulder, tiptoed through the gate, and with no one in sight, skipped through the sparkling green meadow. So
That is a little different than our original. Yeah.
it is, but it still starts the same day. We're starting with a morning and we've got the meadow, so those two pieces are still there. And then another change I made was we have an argument between two characters, but it wasn't a real back and forth. And so I extended that with dialogue. So we really do see the argument occurring. I thought that that was important to really show that. And then the last thing, which I will not tell you what it is, but those of you who are coming today will get to see. I did have a little fun with the ending, and that was the only change that also had to be made to the music. And fortunately, Anthony was willing to do that.
Wow. Okay. So there's a big open mind about all of this. And thank you for not giving us the punchline too soon. We don't want any spoilers here. Um,
No.
to both of you, I am a musician and I know that Russian and Slavic music is never really known for its happy endings, and there is such an element of the frightening and the dark side, literally. I mean, not to go too Star Wars on us here, but it's true in this, isn't it, Anthony? I mean, where you it sounds like you're really changing the landscape, literally.
Yeah, and this was again, as Valerie's pointed out there, the original Prokofiev text is wonderful and is so entertaining, but it is an artifact, and I think there's different ways that we can look at modernizing or making something a little bit more relevant, and taking details of the story that we think would be a bit more just kind of engaging with today's world and where we're at. And the ending that we picked, I think is kind of an exciting, thrilling. It's a bit more of a blockbuster ending way to do it, but I think it's really fun. There is, there's so many directions that you could go with how to approach this music. And, we were talking earlier about, I was mentioning, I know of this flute player named Greg Patillo. He's got a project trio, an ensemble that he rewrote Prokofiev's music for, and he takes the whole thing and he beatboxes while he plays flute. And if you haven't seen the YouTube video, it's phenomenal. It's so hip and modern and fun to listen to. And he just gives everything kind of like a hip hop feel to what Prokofiev wrote. I love his version of it. We kind of are doing that in a very different perspective of saying, let's keep the actual materials of the music exactly how they are, but let's really dial into how we can look at the process that Prokofiev had, how we can look at what it means to create character. The whole kind of genesis of this program came from, talking with the fine arts coordinator for all of Stanford music programs. We were trying to identify, what's really important about this concert. And one of the big things was giving students the opportunity to be musicians, to be performers. And so we can talk a bit more about that. But we also just identified Peter and the Wolf as like I was in professional orchestras for 10 years, and for some reason, I never got to play Peter and the Wolf. I love this music. I want to do it. So we said, let's do Peter and the Wolf. And I'm sitting around thinking, like, what do we do? How do we get into it? And around the same time is when I was introduced to Valerie at one of our Orchestra Lumos concerts. And Valerie gave me her book, her most recent book, which looks at different instruments of the world and kind of a grand exposure of instruments from different cultures and from different regions. And I'm looking at this and saying, this is so cool. I would love to use this. I would love to do this. Um, but what we have at our disposal are orchestral instruments, right? So actually, this isn't what I want to highlight, but I would love to highlight working with Valerie. I would love to get her voice. I would love to get her perspective. And so as I'm looking through this book, I'm saying, well, part of what makes this so interesting is there's a wonderful story with illustration. And the illustration adds to the story and complements the story. And the whole premise of our concert is going to be based around Valerie, all of us in this room, these musicians on stage, this guy in the front, these 1,400 musicians sitting in their chairs with their recorders. We're all musicians sitting in this room. We're in the Palace Theater. This is where we do music, right? And Valerie comes in as a writer and says, "Oh, hey, I'm not a musician. I'm a writer," which she is a musician too. But for the premise of this show, tell me a bit about music. And I happen to have this story that I want to write. It's called Whitney and the Wolf, and I usually use illustration to go along with my stories to paint a bigger picture of my stories. But I was wondering, could we illustrate a story with music? What would that look like? And it's a simple concept. It's not anything mind-blowing. But the whole point of the concert is to really dial into that, to really dig into that concept. So instead of saying, well, the bird sounds like this, and make a bunch of assumptions, and then the cat sounds like this, which is often how this is presented, we say, well, what group of instruments would be good at this? And so if we picked this group of instruments, great. Who has an idea for a theme they could play? What does it mean to play a theme? And a lot of our music we're actually sourcing from the kids. They're songs that they've been working on with their recorders, which unsurprisingly are actually Prokofiev tunes, but kind of worked out to be on recorder. And so they're going to be teaching us a lot of these themes. And we're going to say, oh, that's a great theme for Whitney. We can use Whitney's theme. And what would we change if we wanted Whitney to be sleepy? How can we affect the tempo? How can we affect the character of how we're playing, or the way that the instrumentalists are using their bows or their tonguing or something to create a different kind of sound to reflect this character change we want. So if all of a sudden Calvin's excited, well, that's because we're going to change the tempo in this way. We're going to change the dynamics in this way. So we're giving the students creative control over this piece, as opposed to kind of handing it down from on high, which is how it's usually presented.
Wow.
And we're taking liberties. And I think that's what makes it a bit more interesting and a bit more fun. From the perspective of changing the ending, as we were talking about, I feel totally confident doing that, because I think they're going to understand what musically we are going to change in order to enact the the small text change that we're making.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah.
so this is truly immersive on so many levels. I mean, you're going to play with this like clay, it sounds to me.
Yeah.
1,400 children. Really?
Yes.
1,400.
Yep. It's all the fourth graders in Stanford are invited to this. So, and the idea is, like I said, we're all musicians in the room. So, a lot of our ideas will come from, or a lot of our concepts will come from validating concepts that they're working on in the classroom. So, one of the reasons we picked Peter and the Wolf is they learned it 2 years ago. They studied it in the classroom 2 years ago. They might remember aspects of it. I would love for them to recognize bits of it. If it's kind of in the back of their memories of, oh, that was familiar. I remember a little bit of that. They've been working on tempo. They've been working on dynamics. They've been working on reading and performing music. So this is an opportunity for, in a one-off instance, I'm not going to teach you how to play an instrument, but I can validate everything that your teachers have been doing a wonderful job of teaching you in the classroom. I can give the reward to, hey, if you do this, you can be part of this great experiment. You can be part of this great performance. Yeah.
Wow. So my next question is, why fourth grade?
Sure. So fourth grade is one of my favorite years to work with. I feel like fourth grade is the sweet spot of still being curious and kind of young and malleable and enthusiastic, while also having a lot of ability. Fourth grade is the year where you're able to take on some responsibility and to follow a thread and to kind of suspend your disbelief knowingly. And fourth grade's a wonderful age, but it's also a very important age when it comes to instruments. Fourth grade, like I said, is a crucial time to be saying like, hey, I want to identify that violin. I want to identify playing the oboe or the trumpet. And it's a wonderful chance to plant that seed of instrumental music education. In middle school, you're going to want to be playing clarinet. And in order to do that, it'd be great to start it next year. It'd be great to get on that instrument, get some practice in, get some lessons, take advantage of any of the wonderful community music schools that Stanford has to offer also. And yeah, it's a really perfect time to start an instrument. So if we can get people excited about that, I think it'd be wonderful. They don't know it yet, but the students are coming back to an offer. So they're going to have some colored pencils that we're giving everyone that does this, so they can come home and illustrate their own picture of Whitney and the Wolf. But on the back of the colored pencils are an offer to bring their families to our next Orchestra Lumos concert, which we're doing in March, which is a all Mozart program, with the idea of this is the beginning of a continued relationship. We want you to feel that's part of the whole reason that we we very intentionally moved back to the Palace this year. We want to be at the Palace Theater because we want all of Stanford to feel like this is a place where they're welcome, they're valued, they're accepted in this building, that it's a comfortable place for them to be. So we want them to be the tour guides to bring their parents in the next week and say, hey, Mom, I was here. Let me show you where the bathroom is.
The tour guides, I love that. Look how many bridges you are building. Valerie Anthony is speaking about colored pencils, and I can't help but think about on your website when you spoke so lovingly about your grandmother putting a pencil in your hand when you were young to learn to write, and you wrote and wrote. Just like Julia Cameron says in The Artist's Way, you do your morning pages, and you have. And what you have put into your art form and discipline, I feel that you're trying to share with the children that are coming to this wonderful project.
Yes, and one of the things I'm hoping to be able to do as well, as an author now, I go into schools and do school visits. So in addition to my normally scheduled school visits, I've created 2 special visits for this program. So one is, they're both centered on revision. I told you earlier, revision is my favorite part of the writing process. So in one offering, I will actually talk about revision through the lens of the work that I actually did to transform Peter and the Wolf into Whitney and the Wolf. And I would have, slides showing sort of the way I read to you earlier. This was the original beginning. This is what I changed. And I would talk about how I did that. I would go through different aspects of the story and talk about revision. And the other would be to come in and do a revision workshop and talk about certain techniques and strategies that students can use to transform their own writing. And that, of course, would be dependent upon the fact that students are currently in a writing unit where they're actually, in the workshopping phase of, sort of revising a piece that they're currently working on. So for me, connecting with children, connecting with students is something that I just enjoy so much. And to be able to talk to students, I have another presentation that I do in general, not directly connected to Whitney and the Wolf, but where I talk about a little bit, kid-friendly version of the publication process and tell a bit of my story for those children who may want to become authors.
Yes.
And then I read little snippets from several of my books. So it's not, a read aloud of an entire book. And I think it's very important, Pam, for children to see that, because when I was growing up, I received a lot of validation that I was a very good writer, but I didn't always in my classrooms read books that were written by people who looked like me or that had characters who looked like me. So I'm not sure I really believed that that was something I could be.
Hmm.
And so I think it's important to let children know at a young age that if you're interested in writing, you can become an author. If you're an artist, I love that we're giving away the colored pencils. You can be an artist and draw, or you can be a musician. And I love that we're bringing students into the theater and then saying, come back with your families, because these experiences show all of the possibilities that children have available to them. It gives them access and it shows them different futures that they can dream of, and what not just dream of, but actually become.
And the sense of pride. You're giving them a platform to be so filled with pride and to be heard. And I know, Valerie, in all of your works, and you are beloved by critics for this, in all of your reviews, you are enabling everyone to be heard and to be recognized and be validated, which is one of the most important things in the world right now. And we
Thank you. It
must
is.
keep this spinning. We must keep it spinning and present. Anthony, I know in your own work, you just seem to be mad crazy about children. And when I look at your website, when I look at your articles, everything you've written, you always have your viola in your hand. And there's a beautiful subtlety that you use in designing this community embedded musicianship. And for some of my listeners who don't really understand about that job title, could you please walk us through it? And can you tell me, do you have a recipe for putting ideas together? Because you seem to be the kind of guy that maybe lays in bed at night and goes, "Hey, I got a clever idea here. We're going to hook this up with this." So maybe that's too much in one question, but go for it.
Um, I know I would love to speak to that. So yes, I mean, I think that there are different reasons to get into being a musician and different wonderful things that you can give as a musician to audiences and to communities. And um, for me, I've always so my dad's an opera singer.
Ah,
But so I grew up backstage at the Met. I grew up in Italy going to you know, the backstages of concert halls, and I was in that world. And my mom is a second grade teacher, was second grade for 37 years. And so I grew up grading papers too. And that means that I've always been really interested in the intersection there. And especially when you look at opera, it's even more so than instrumental music. Um, there's a story, there's a narrative, there's a drama to things, let's say. My dad was one of the least dramatic opera singers that I know, but there's a lot of personalities in that world. Um, and I
yes,
think I've
there are.
yes, there are. I think it got me thinking about the perception of music. It got me thinking about, you know, what does music do for us? What is the value of music? Um, versus, I've never been so concerned about quality. I've never been so, you know, obviously what I want to do is present something of quality, but I've never been in a competition in my life. That sounds like a waste of my time. It's beautiful for some people, but it's just not for me, you know. I've always been really committed to what does it mean to take part in something. You know, I used to want to be a conductor because I love conducting. This is actually one of the first times today that I'll be conducting in a long time because I've been on that violist route. And I started to play viola as a means of getting into better orchestras to get more opportunity as a conductor, and quickly realized that viola was this wonderful role in an orchestra of being a supporter, of being someone who encourages and can kind of lead from behind, or can kind of you know, manipulate a circumstance without actually being at the forefront of it. And I love that role. I think that's so fun and interesting. And so when I work in communities and when I work with kids, um, you know, the first question for me, or the first opportunity, is not what can I tell them, but it's what can they tell me? You know,
Mm.
Mm.
how can what this community does well, how can what this group of kids do well inform what I'm about to do? And I used to, when I first got into doing community engagement work, I used to plan these really elaborate talking points and all of these thoughts and all the stuff that I wanted to say and make sure that, and I'm going to say that joke too, because then they'll laugh and, all these things. And uh, kids just, if you're not genuine, they will just tell that it is so obvious that they just chew you up and spit you out. And I realized very quickly that actually I was much better. Instead of planning what I wanted to say, I would just plan really good questions, right? Because
Yes.
I would love to be the kind of musician that responds to what a community gives me, that responds to um, what someone has to say. So, what my typical first thing that I say when I show up with my viola is, "What is this thing?" And no
Mm.
matter what you tell me, if you tell me it's a viola, cool. Why? How did you know about violas? And if you tell me it's a violin, I can say, yeah, I can make it sound like a violin, but I could also make it sound like a guitar. I can also make it sound like a tiger. You want to hear that? And then we go down this whole path, But Eric Booth, I've worked with some, is one of my teaching artist mentors, and he always says engagement before information. You're not going to bring anyone in by saying this piece was written in 1753. You're just not.
So
And you
true.
are going to bring someone in by saying, um, have you ever experienced loss? Because to me, when I listen to this piece, I can't help but think about loss.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean to you? I mean, I'm going off on a tangent, but when I look at these concerts, I'm just looking at what the wonderful educators in Stanford Public Schools are valuing, are putting in their curriculum, are saying this is important to us. And the whole raison d'etre, the whole plan behind this concert is just being able to support and add a layer of excitement to what they're already doing so well. So it's just the ability to see, like, you do this, this is great. Let's make this exciting. Let's make this high value. Let's make this a quality product. I guess I
Wow.
do care about quality. I don't know.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I'm feeling verklempt now. I mean, this is the passion from both of you, and it's so put in the right place with just the right amount of focus. I'm loving right now because, before people have tried, with educational outreach, and just the name educational outreach is almost a turnoff, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's kind
I
of like
don't,
you saying engagement before information. And that is so true.
yeah.
Wow.
I
Thank you
don't
for
I
sharing.
don't really I try to not be picky about it because I'm a firm believer that language is, if you understand it, then it worked.
Hmm.
But I don't like the term outreach. And I feel like it's going out of fashion, especially with orchestras, because it's this concept of, we have this thing and we're going to give it to you. We're going to bring it to you. We're going to show you this thing, and maybe if you're good enough, you can do it. Um, and community engagement flips the paradigm. It says, we want to be, I would love for Orchestra Lumos to be a revolving door in our community.
Hmm.
I want people to come not to us, but through us, right? I
Wow.
want the opportunities to engage with our music to be a reflection of the different community organizations, the different populations, the different people that live here, So that's engagement. Engagement is saying, what do you do? What are you interested in? And how can we value that with what we're good at?
Wow. Okay. I
Yes,
think you
indeed.
should run for political office now, but
Yeah.
that's just me. Um, Valerie, I mean, both of you are enabling.
May I say one thing? I'm sorry.
Yes.
So also, I wanted to just say a bit about outreach. Even the term outreach, it's like you're reaching out for
Yeah.
someone. And I also feel it's like outside of the space, but if we think more of in reach, it's about really bringing people in, and what Anthony talked about with questions. What do you need? What do you want? What can we do to make you feel welcome here? As opposed to outreach has this sort of connotation of, I'm going to tell you what you need. This is what I'm going to give you, and it's going to make you better. But when we start from a place of questioning,
Hmm.
that's natural engagement. And that's one thing as a teacher, I know, you don't just go in and lecture, you ask the questions, and you
Right.
want the students to be engaged with each other in conversation, not just, the teacher who's the disseminator of all information. That is not at all true. That's not the paradigm we want.
Right.
And so I think that's what we're trying to create today, even before the show, the actual show begins, is this bringing in and this inclusion of the audience. And what do you think? And how would you play this sound, or what instrument should we use for this? And so it's a natural way to build engagement when we're asking questions, when we're constantly telling we're not able to build engagement. I mean, unless you're an incredibly gifted comedian or storyteller, and you can stand on a stage and just talk and command an audience, very few people have that skill.
I love this is all just so dead honest. I love it. So in that same way, Valerie, how cool is it that you get to stand up and narrate this piece with the kids of your own work?
Yeah, it's incredible. I am so looking forward to that today. I mean, of course, Anthony and I have run through the script and so forth, and also with the orchestra, we had a rehearsal, but to have the student audience there is
Mhm.
just going to be an incredible experience. And I hope that, I mean, yes, I plan to enjoy myself, but I hope what the children get from it, as I said, is all the possibilities. I can be a writer, I can be a musician, I can be on stage, I can just all of the things that they'll get, and again, about possibilities. And I hope that they will be inspired, that something from this experience will inspire them to go back to their classrooms or home and create their own music, come up with their own score, or write a story. And maybe some will be author illustrators. I am not. I am blessed to have wonderful illustrators, provide the art for my books. But there are young people and, people of all ages who have the talent to do both. So if they come away inspired, and if they come away and they're so excited to come back to that performance, to the Mozart performance, and bring their families, I mean, I think that's what we want. That would be wonderful. I think then Anthony and I can say this is what we wanted.
I think you will. I think you guys will succeed. And we must say, this is hot on the heels of your Bugs Bunny at the symphony, where, you're really on a roll right now. I mean, and then going to the Broadway concert, I feel, and then of course leading them into Mozart. This is all step by step. You guys are doing a fabulous job.
Thank you.
I'm so pleased for you all and what you're doing to extend this energy and this beautiful enthusiasm out to these kids. But most importantly, it just seems to me, I mean, if I was one of those kids, I'd be going home to my mom and dad going, I did it. I absolutely did it. You've got to come and see, And I get it that is as your motivation right now, and it's going to work. And then they'll bear responsibility for wanting to hear Mozart.
Yes.
Well, I think the the secret payoff at the end of this, we're focusing on Prokofiev's music as the main material for this, and we're really diving deep into it, and how can we change things, and how can we affect things, and how can we make decisions that color this. But I also very much want to highlight that we've got examples that demonstrate here's the tools we're working with. And so to show you what a string ensemble sounds like, I want them to hear Jessie Montgomery's music, because I feel like she gets string writing so well. So we're doing Voodoo Dolls from Jessie Montgomery, and the Ligeti Six Bagatelles for Winds, to me, are just such a brilliant, sparkling highlight of a piece. So I want that to be featured. I want that. And to me, it's less about saying like, well, and here's Ligeti. It's more about saying, and here's possibility. Here's what we can do. We're opening the piece actually with a reworking of Arturo Marquez's Danzón Number 2. That we're going to be walking around the hall, kind of having conversations with. We're going to use it as a musical conversation, which I wish I could describe, but you just have to see it. It's kind of complicated. But
Wow.
to Valerie's point, at the end, when we finish this whole piece and we feel accomplished from this, the last piece we do will be featuring a local Stanford High School student, Emily Soralus, who's going to be playing a concerto movement with us, playing the Vinyasa Legend. And it's going to be such a wonderful opportunity to say, this is Emily. She's at Stanford High. This is going to be you in 7 years. This can be you in 7 years. You can
Mm-hmm.
totally achieve this. There's no
Mm-hmm.
barrier to you achieving this because she grew up right here in Stanford. This is your opportunity, so go seize it.
That's thrilling. See, Valerie, there's your next book, Legacy Possibility. I love it.
Absolutely.
This play on words carries on. Well,
Yes.
you guys are incredible. I've just got to say I'm really humbled by this conversation, and I just feel that what you're doing has such a raw, pure honesty to it that I'm really humbled, and I hope my listeners are too. And
Hmm.
all my listeners need to go out and connect with Orchestra Lumos if you have not already, because this is an orchestra that is literally rebuilding itself in such a way that it's a new entity. And I think it's very exciting for this area. With people like Anthony Parce and Valerie Bolling, I think you're going to go far, and I think this is going to be a huge success with Whitney and the Wolf. And good luck to you, Anthony, in the conducting.
Thank you.
and
I'll need
and and,
it.
and continue to keep that light shining both within your faces and the orchestras. And I want to encourage all of my listeners to seek out more information on my guest today at anthonyparse.com and valeriebowling.com. And of course, you can go to orchestralumos.org. Very important. And you can find more of my shows at centerstagewithpamelakuhn.com. But the important thing is that you need to watch for Anthony Parse and Valerie Bolling as they walk forward with Orchestra Lumos. And we all hold hands together and we all walk into this new wonderland of what music and art can do together. Together, everyone. And if anyone is out there thinking they might like to make a donation to an orchestra, I think Orchestra Lumos just might say yes to that. So, Anthony, Valerie, thank you so much for being with me. This has really been enlightening, and good luck with everything.
It's been a
Thank
wonderful
you.
conversation. Thank you so much.
You bet. It's been my pleasure indeed. And to all my listeners, stay safe out there. This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is now down on Center Stage.